Welcome to Chicks Who Fly, a podcast dedicated to women pilots and women in aviation. My name is Inaya and I am your host. I am a vocalist, a DJ, and a producer, and I'm also a student pilot. I am currently working on my private pilot certificate in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've decided to stay active in the aviation community by starting this podcast, among other things. I am interviewing women pilots and women aviators and bringing these interviews to you. I hope that you enjoy these interviews as much as I enjoy spending time with these amazing ladies. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube, as well as sharing with all your friends who might enjoy this podcast as well. Also, if you would like to be more intimately involved with the creation of this podcast, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon at Chicks Who Fly. You can reach us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com and on our website, chickswhofly.com. In today's episode, I get to have a chat with Christine Hannon of One Plain Jane. As a kid, Christine used to take walks with her grandfather to KAIY Bader Field in Atlantic City, pushing her favorite doll in its pink stroller. Together, they would watch the planes take off and land. Christine's parents told her she could do anything, but she never got the idea to become a pilot until a bit later in life. Christine started out in the aviation industry as a ramp agent. A big part of the reason she took the job was because of the travel benefits, but she grew to love the company and the aviation industry. While applying for a leadership position in her job, a friend recommended she learn to fly, and off she went. Today, Christine is an instrument-rated private pilot working on her commercial certificate. She lives in Madrid, Spain, with her husband. She owns and runs One Plain Jane, a company that creates products to empower women inspired by female aviators. Christine believes that it is our responsibility to show little girls they can be pilots and to celebrate not just what each woman does, but who she is and what she is capable of. In today's conversation, Christine and I talk about how she met her CFI, what her training was like, and about her life in Madrid. We talk about her future aviation goals, her company One Plain Jane, the life lessons and discipline that aviation gives you, using aviation to make a difference in the community, and much more. This was a fun, informative, and inspiring conversation with a cool and badass pilot, adventurer, and entrepreneur that I hope you enjoy as much as I did. You can connect with Christine on her Instagram, Facebook, or her website, all of which are One Plain Jane. So without further ado, here is the conversation that I got to have with Christine Hannon of One Plain Jane. Hi, Christine. Welcome to Chicks Who Fly. Super pumped to have you here. How is it going today?
Oh, hi. Thanks so much for having me. It's a good day here. I'm in Madrid, Spain, and life is good on this side of the pond today. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm actually in St. John's, Arizona, which is a remote little part of Arizona close to the New Mexico border.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm moving towards Santa Fe so that I can finish my private pilot certification and stuff over there. So let me just start at the beginning. How did you get into aviation and into becoming a pilot?
I actually started working part-time for the airlines as a ramp agent, and a friend was working there and referred me. I thought it'd be nice for the travel benefits. I was in between jobs and looking to move out of my current location. I was in Columbus, Ohio. So I thought I'd use the travel benefits and find another job and move on. But I ended up loving the company and the industry, and a good friend of mine gave me the advice of, if you want to be a leader in the company, why don't you learn how to fly the airplane? So that's what I did. I was applying for leadership positions with the company when I started flight training in Ohio, and ended up staying there for flying, but moving to New York for work and commuting back and forth probably more than a commercial pilot did on a weekly basis. So that's how it got started.
And what were you doing as a ramp agent for people who don't know what a ramp agent does?
Yeah, of course. So the ramp is the area where the aircraft park. So as a ramp agent, my responsibility was to load the baggage on the aircraft. If I was in the bag room one day, I had to sort the bags to their destinations. And then we also, my favorite part was to push the airplanes back from the gate. That was always a treat. And talking to the pilots, I actually got to know a lot of the pilots there and pick their brains a bit, which was a great resource and a kind of unique mentorship opportunity there. And that was it. I got to see all the puppies that came through. I always made sure that they had water, and learned how to fold almost every type of baby stroller on the market, probably, when we were retrieving the gate checked bags.
Wow, I never thought of that. I worked at an FBO, but a really tiny airport, and I was actually just at the front desk, but all the line guys came in and out, and they were going to teach me to marshal airplanes, but then COVID hit and I got laid off. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear.
It's okay. It's actually detonated a whole chain of events that has changed my life for the better. So I'm super excited. So sometimes cool things come from unexpected places.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
So then, how did you feel when they told you you should learn, to fly the planes? Were you excited? Had you ever thought about it before, or was that like the first time you ever thought about it?
I mean, obviously working at an airport, the thought crossed my mind, but I never really thought about it as a career. Though I have to say I had met my flight instructor a year and a half prior. When I was going to New York to see my best friend in her Broadway debut, the nice thing about working for an airline is the non-revenue flight benefits, being able to hop on a plane if there's an empty seat and go somewhere for dinner or for your weekend, whatever the case may be. So anyhow, I was going to New York, and it wasn't a full flight. I was talking to a uniformed pilot in the gate area, and we ended up sitting together on the plane to New York and just chatting the whole way. He actually only had a few years left with the company before retirement, but was telling me how his dream as a young boy was to have his own airplane, and now he had 6 and a flight school just south of Columbus. And he was someone that had a certain command presence that showed me, well, I don't know if I want to learn how to fly an airplane now, but if I decide that I want to in the future, I knew this was the person that was going to teach me. So when I decided to do it later, that's exactly who I called. And now I call him Dad too. He's like family.
That's awesome. It's really important to have a good relationship with your flight instructor, I've learned, as I've been through a few.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you were training in Columbus?
Yeah, just outside of Columbus, to the south, Lancaster, Ohio. KLHQ, it's Fairfield County, Ohio.
Cool. I'm assuming his school was a Part 61 school?
Yeah, it was. It's Sundowner Aviation, Part 61. And when I started, I actually didn't even really know the difference between Part 61 and Part 141. But the Part 61 actually worked out perfectly with, working full-time and doing flight training.
First of all, none of us know the difference between a Part 61 and 141 when we start.
Right.
But I checked out Part 141 University with a degree program and everything. And I went and I checked it out. But not only is it like a lot more expensive, but the lack of, it was rigid. Like Spanish is my first language. So, and they were going to require me to take a Spanish class. Like I couldn't test out of it. I couldn't study another language and things like that. I feel like they slow down the learning process, because it's not only with languages, but they'll do that with aviation too. And if I need extra time on aircraft systems, but I breeze right through airspace, it doesn't matter. It's whatever they allot. So what was your experience like once you started to train?
Well, I started, in September 2014, and I was actually working part-time on the ramp still, and then I was doing personal training. I had my certification for that. So the ramp kind of paid the bills. I kept living expenses pretty minimal, and then the training paid for the personal training paid for the flight training, because I didn't really want to take out any loans or anything like that. So I took my time with it, but my instructor was actually an instructor at the Air Force Academy, wrote the course on human factors. Super smart guy. But he knew at the time my goal was to fly commercial. I essentially wanted his job. And he put me on the path to that from the beginning, both in terms of knowledge and finances and everything, to say, look, we're going to do this safely, but you're going to solo as soon as possible, because when you're ready, there's no point in paying for an instructor when you can go solo more, and you need the time to solo for the commercial long term anyway. So, I mean, he treated it pretty aggressively, but it worked for me. I was always comfortable, and I trusted him, which was important. So I soloed in November with just under 10 hours, and then at the end of November, I actually transferred to New York full-time with the company in a leadership position, and that's when I started commuting back and forth. But he happened to be stationed in New York as a wide-body pilot there, and we would commute together oftentimes into ground school in the air on the way into New York, whether it was test prep or just going over the book, or even pulling up for flight and watching the approaches when it was time to do some familiarization with instrument training, and then later for the instrument training. So I got my private in May of 2015, and then I took my time as I was really pretty heavy with the full-time work, working on the instrument, which I did in June of the following year.
Oh, very cool. Are you working on anything now?
Very slowly working on the commercial. I'm kind of at the point of I'll take the check ride and study hard for it when I'm closer in the hours. I'm just over 180 hours right now. But being in Spain, I need to fly back to the States for flight training. So I fly back and forth often enough to stay current with instrument flying. But other than that, we'll see if I can't get a chunk of time in the future to work a little more on it.
Understood. Eventually, once you have your FAA ratings, is there any chance you might fly being in Spain, in any capacity?
In Spain, it would be unlikely. We said if we won the lottery, my other half is an aircraft maintenance technician. So he works for the airlines here in Spain, for the U.S. airline here in Spain. And we said if we won, we would fly an N number plane over from the States so that he could work on it. I could fly it. He'd get his license too, or finish his license. But no, there's not really a general aviation community here, unfortunately, with the regulations and the cost. But with my family being in the States, he's a dual citizen. We're back and forth quite frequently. So at this point, it's twofold that I'll have it for enjoyment for when we're there. In the future, it's something we want to expose kids to, and it's something that we use to educate kids in the community here. And it's an insurance plan for me that if there were any case, our plan is to stay in Madrid. His family is here. This is where he's from. But if we ever had to go back to the States to stay with the company if anything were to happen, as we know that the market is volatile in the industry as well. Then I would look at doing maybe some flight instructing or corporate flying in the U.S.
Cool. Yeah, I've actually thought about that because, first of all, my husband's from Argentina, and he also has an EU passport. So I wondered that because we want to buy a boat and sail to Uruguay, and we'd like to be mobile. And one of the ways that I've thought I could possibly keep aviation in my life until I settle down somewhere and actually start doing it for work is buying an N number plane and, taking it to wherever I'm based at the moment. So
yeah, it would definitely be an adventure. So.
Yeah, I've seen some cool YouTube videos of people who fly around the world in a Cessna RG, for example. That kind of stuff really gets my attention. What are your favorite things about aviation as far as what you've experienced so far?
I would say, first of all, it's the community for me and the people. I actually feel like I've become more connected in the general aviation community remotely since moving to Spain than I was in the States, perhaps because I was so focused on the license and ratings when I was there. And now, to stay connected with it, it's really been the people that have kept my love for it alive. But I just like the perspective of getting up there in the plane and, the humility of realizing how small we are. It just turns any day into a good day in the air, I think. And yeah, it's something that I think our whole house is decorated with airplanes. It will be in our lives permanently.
That's awesome. My husband is a drone pilot, but I told him if I ever become a CFI, he can be my first student.
Nice. Well, my instructor warned me not to become a CFI for my husband because he makes me a little nervous in the car, and he's like, well, then you definitely don't want to be his flight instructor.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be a really tricky dynamic. It wouldn't work for just anybody. So
yeah.
It has to be a specific kind of dynamic in the relationship, I think.
Absolutely. No, he's a good student and a good teacher, but I don't know if my nerves could handle it.
Right. And that's what I mean, not about how much one gets along, because some people get along fantastic, but maybe their learning styles are not so compatible, and, it would be better to be paired with someone who really is tailored to your way of learning.
Yeah, it's true. Definitely.
So once you started training and started doing some things, were there some maneuvers or some aspects of becoming a pilot that were particularly difficult for you to grasp?
I would say, I think the biggest thing was trusting myself. Like, for example, as silly as it sounds, I was always given a hard time by my instructor that my seat turns were too shallow. And little details of, I feel like because I didn't grow up with aviation, maybe, I don't know, or I didn't have a formal education in it, it took me longer to trust myself. I knew that I had what I needed to be safe and to operate the airplane well, but I don't know, maybe not fully understanding the capabilities of the airplane. Like I'm someone that when I learn something, I want to learn it all with a lot of detail. So I feel like I almost wish I could do it now, but I wish I had done it before. An A&P course, or spent more time in the shop, like learning about the engine and learning more of the nuances of the airplane, so that I could really appreciate all that it could do.
Yeah, I totally get that. And aircraft systems is not one of my strong points. I've also thought about getting in the shop more and stuff like that. Once you see how it works, it kind of changes your relationship to it, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I see Annika he's an A&P, as I said, he lives and breathes airplanes. And I've flown with him, with my instructor, we've traded off on lakes before. And he is just a natural with it because he understands the airplane. So I see how much value that is to the learning experience and the flight experience.
Yeah. I never thought about it like that, but that's a really cool way to visualize it. Cool.
Yeah.
Were there any parts of learning to fly that came naturally to you?
I feel like I'm a visual learner. So if my instructor demonstrated something first, I was able to pick it up pretty quickly. So the actual flying maneuvers felt pretty good.
Cool. I'm the same way. And for a while I was paired with someone who didn't demonstrate, and I just wasn't progressing. So it makes a huge difference, man.
It does, and I've had other instructors in between because he was working as a commercial pilot for most of the time that I was training with him. So inevitably, sometimes our schedules didn't match, and I needed to continue with the lessons, and he'd be in Europe somewhere on the other side of the states. So he had great instructors, but you just see different personalities and learning styles. And I had to do some training for work in Atlanta for a few weeks where I got checked out in a plane to fly down there. And it was, again, with the instructor, albeit a good instructor, totally different experience.
Yeah. It's a stark contrast. When I was flying with that instructor that wasn't the best match, and he went away for vacation, and I got someone else who was like a stellarly good match for me, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I just couldn't see myself. It seemed like a waste of money to fly with someone who was now clearly not a compatible teacher for me. So I know you have this company, One Plane Jane, which I heard you say that you had purchased from a friend of yours. You want to talk a little bit about One Plane Jane?
Sure. So I've had the company for a little bit over a year now. This summer would be my second Oshkosh in charge of it, and the fourth one for the company. So still a new company either way. And my friend Angie started it, Angie Kozik, because she got her private pilot's license and wanted a feminine flight bag, but she couldn't find one. So her husband told her to make one, and she did. And she learned how to sew Italian leather and made the bag, decided to sell them, and realized there was a huge gap in the market for products for women in aviation. So that's how the company got started. And then about a year and a half ago, she came to me to ask if I was interested in it. We had met when I had a travel blog, and we're just going to help each other with small businesses, and became good friends. We met at Fun and Fun, camped together at Oshkosh. This would have been 2 years ago now. And then I took over the company in March of last year. She still stayed with me to help transition it. But we have products for women in aviation, but it's not exclusively for women nor exclusively for aviation, but really for the adventurous ones. Though, of course, the target market is for the female aviators. So apparel, accessories, bags, all sorts of things. And the future goal is to get into more online education and resources, outreach for students.
Very cool. That's a great goal, and I think a lot of the pilots, especially in the U.S., who get into general aviation do it because they really like the adventure and the travel. I think that's a big part of it. Is it one of the things that drew you to aviation?
Yeah, it absolutely was. I look at when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to live my life out of a suitcase because my role model was my dad's cousin, and I pretty much wanted to be her. She was an international corporate attorney and had lived and traveled all over Europe and other parts of the world, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. So that's what I wanted to do until I entered high school. Then my favorite teacher was actually only a teacher because he was waiting on paperwork from the State Department to enter the Foreign Service. And then I learned about what a diplomat does, and I thought I wanted to be a diplomat. And still a life out of a suitcase for quite a period of time. And then in college, I interned for an embassy, U.S. embassy, and decided I didn't want to be a diplomat, but was still looking at government work overseas. But long story short, all of these career aspirations came from role models, and all of them involved travel. But no one said to me, oh, well, do you ever think about being a pilot? The thought was never presented, never crossed my mind until, again, a friend got a job throwing bags on the airplanes and got me the referral. So it was absolutely the travel that brought me into it. And a lot of the continuing education that got me interested in the leadership in the pilot aspect of it. And then, of course, the love of airplanes inevitably comes along with it.
Yeah, I relate so much. My grandmother was one of my role models. She used to not only travel a lot, but she used to encourage my cousins and me to not settle down too early and have children too early, but to get an education and travel. And I flew a lot as a kid. And then when I was like young, I had like this choir director that used to always be, you know, on the road and flying. And I mean, I grew up in the 70s in Puerto Rico, so I thought the only way that I could be in a plane all the time was to be a flight attendant, and that's what I wanted to be. And then eventually I used to sing contracts in five-star hotels, mostly in Asia, but a little bit in South America and Europe as well. But I always found a way to make living in hotels and flying around the world part of my life. And I still didn't think that being a pilot was something that was realistic. It just never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And one day I had somebody in my Lyft. I was driving for Lyft on the side in Los Angeles, and she was a pilot, and you know, a couple of people kind of brought it up, and my husband really encouraged me, and that's how I got started. Did you have someone particularly encouraging you and championing your becoming a pilot?
I think everyone was supportive, but nobody really pushed it. Probably my flight instructor more than anything. But my parents were, of course, supportive, as they always have been. When I met Angel, though, the funny thing is we met on my flight instructor's retirement flight to Madrid. We had met previously, but never kept in touch, and met up for dinner when I was here. And that's actually was like the beginning of the end of my flight training, for better or for worse. But he won me over, I'll say, when we were, you know, long distance, and we did some European trips. And then his first trip to visit me, obviously he's a dual citizen, so he spent ample time in the States. But his first trip to see me was when he said, you know, a month into us together, I'll be your wingman this weekend. He came over to fly with me. So he's been encouraging of me to continue flying. And as I mentioned, he wants to finish his license as well.
Fabulous. And then you guys both travel to the U.S. when you guys need to train, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
And how many times a year does that happen?
Well, in normal conditions, this year's obviously the exception. Right. We're usually in the States every 6 to 8 weeks to get an address in New York to pick up the mail, have dinner with my parents, something like that. The actual flying is a little less frequent. I pretty much stick to the every 6 months for the instrument from a legality standpoint, but I honestly wouldn't go fly in instrument conditions with just that. I would do a lot more training before that, or be with my instructor. So So that's about where we're at now with the flying. If we get more flying in, that's great, but every 6 months is the goal there.
Do you do any ground school online or stuff like that while you're away?
I actually just did a flight review on my last trip to the States. We were there a few weeks ago, end of June, beginning of July, and I did the ground portion of the flight review online and had a really good experience with that. And then I also try to keep up with some of the professional development and safety videos as well.
Oh, cool. Are you a member of any organizations that provide some support and connection to the aviation community?
I am an active member of the 99s and EAA and Women in Aviation. In the past, in the States, because I had the renter's insurance, when I was flying different places, I was with AOPA as well, and I've used Sporty's products as well.
Cool. I'm a member of the 99s and AOPA. Is there any particular organization you would recommend that I check out, next?
I would say check out Women in Aviation, because it's the whole aviation industry, and you can meet some pretty cool people there. And they do some great events, like their Girls in Aviation Day, which we actually did in Madrid for the past 2 years. This year, I just saw the notice on the AOPA website actually that they're going virtual this year, which is wonderful considering the situation, because we are trying to figure out how to do a virtual event ourselves. So it's great that they're going to have some really wonderful resources there. But I absolutely love their Girls in Aviation Day events every year. And then I would say come to my 99th meeting, because ours is virtual every month.
Oh, ours is too. I'm not always making it. I've been bad lately just because we're on the road, and every place we go, it's a new routine, which is great. But all I do all day, every day right now is study, because I'm about to start flying in 2 weeks, and I made like this super long, ridiculously long playlist on YouTube of like private pilot type videos, and just trying to refresh everything and learn checklists and emergency procedures and get familiar with the airport on Google Earth and stuff like
cool.
that. I like to arrive prepared. I just think
that's admirable.
Demonstrates. Yeah. Oh, thanks. I just think it demonstrates respect towards what you're doing, and when it comes to art, like singing and music, I think that's important. But when it comes to aviation, it's important not only for the beauty of it, but because of the huge responsibility of it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Nobody's going to die if I sing a wrong note,
Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
You're teaching English right now, correct?
I am, yes.
Gotcha. So do you have any connection through your husband to the aviation community in any way as well?
Yes, because he's with the airlines as well. So I'm actually one of the few people, my friends joke, I left the airline and got a bump up of 2 years in seniority with him. So, yeah, and I still keep a relationship with the company because they sponsor the Girls in Aviation Day event here. So that's great, and they do a lot for the community. And there's also a group here in Spain called Aviadoras, which is through the Spanish Pilots Union. They have a group to promote women in aviation. But they're promoting women in aviation, but they're promoting just aviation to youth in general as well. It's not anything that's exclusive to women. So by the name Aviadoras, a feminine name, that's what they're trying to draw attention to. So I've done some outreach events with them as well, and the founder is a good friend of mine here.
Oh, that sounds really cool. It must be such a different experience.
It is. It's interesting because they actually have at the small airport on the south side of Madrid, they have an air show every month, usually. Again, this year's different, but the first Sunday of every month is an air show, and we went once or twice. It's cool because it's airplanes, of course, but it's totally different than in the States because it's the general public. It's not a bunch of aviation enthusiasts. Granted, there are some there, but it's very much just like a family Sunday afternoon with the kids. So you don't get the same community aspect that you get in the States where you meet up, like a reunion with your friends at the air shows. But it's neat that the general public gets to understand a little bit more about aviation.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different perspective. Yeah, that sounds super cool. Since there is no general aviation, I assume there's nothing like Pilots for Paws or Angel Flight or any charitable organizations that a regular Joe Schmo pilot can be a part of?
Unfortunately not. I mean, general aviation exists, but it's hardly noticeable, sad to say. We have a friend, one of Anka's colleagues' brother-in-law is a private pilot. He doesn't work in aviation at all. He just loves airplanes and is a private pilot here. But it's not like he flies every weekend. He flies every now and then for fun. But it's not a big thing. So no, unfortunately, there aren't those sorts of organizations here culturally, and I don't know if it's culture or government regulations, but the community service environment here is just totally different from the United States. That's one of the things that we're grateful for with Anka working for a U.S. company, is to be able to keep that involvement and try to, ourselves have a grassroots effort to get neighbors and friends involved in that way.
I mean, it could be a way, something that you can bring over there, but it's true. Most cultures and Hispanic cultures, like Puerto Rico included, I remember we used to look up to Americans because of the DIY spirit and the entrepreneurial spirit, and that wasn't very prevalent in Puerto Rico. And my family, like I said, had a lot of connection to Spain, and we used to travel there. With my first international trip was to Madrid, actually. So,
okay.
But many years ago, my uncle used to be in the military, and he was based in Madrid for some years.
Okay. Spanish military or U.S.?
U.S.
So was he in Torrejon?
I was too young to remember.
Well, I asked because we literally live right across the highway from the old U.S. Air Base, which is now a Spanish air base. So we kind of did a private air show every day, which is awesome.
That sounds awesome.
It's awesome.
Do you think you guys will stay there, kind of permanently, or do you think you guys will eventually come back to the States or go to a different location?
No, the plan is to stay here. He told me from the first date that Madrid was home. So if this was going anywhere, I was coming to Madrid. So I told him Madrid would be the easy part. And yeah, we love it here. Just bought a house almost 2 years ago now. So the next step is to build a family here.
Amazing. I've actually considered moving to Spain. So many things have happened. First, 2008 really kicked Spain's butt, and then COVID really kicked Spain's butt. How's that? Are you able to get out very much?
Now it's wonderful, but my gosh, yeah, it was rough here. I think I went a solid 3 weeks without leaving the house at all. And we feel so grateful, so blessed to have a house with some outdoor space. So, I mean, at least there's that, because the weather in Spain is spectacular. So at least we were able to enjoy the garden and do some exercise outside at home. But I didn't leave the property for 3 weeks, because he was taking care of his parents in a neighboring town, making sure they didn't leave. So he did all the grocery shopping while he picked up things for them. And then after that, I have to get out and I walk to the grocery store. Everything's walkable here. We're not in the center of Madrid. You would call it suburban, but you really don't need a car. The way restaurants and supermarkets are accessible, we've got a train into the city and buses as well. But it was, I think, 6 weeks before the kids were allowed outside, and I think it was 8 weeks for the adults before you could actually go for a walk for leisure, for exercise. Otherwise, it was just a walk to the grocery store. But it worked. I mean, I think that the exercise bit was a little extreme, but the rest of it worked because now we get to go to the beach and people are respecting the distance and whatever regulations are put in place for capacity or masks or whatever the case may be, things are functioning at the moment.
Well, lucky you. It's really insane here right now. So I'm glad Arizona's getting hit pretty hard, and I'm glad to be moving on to New Mexico, which seems to be calmer at the moment.
It's hard. We were there a few weeks ago, and we were checking flights every day. I have a student that works for Iberia, the Spanish airline, and we're all, comparing seats on planes, worrying that flights were going to get canceled, which they did by them when the European Union decided that Americans couldn't come over. And we didn't want to get stuck. I mean, Granted, we have family on both sides. We're okay, and he's not going back to work yet, but we wanted to come home.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I wanted to come home to the cat.
You have cats too?
Yeah.
I have 3.
Oh, we've got 2.
Well, we meant to have 2, but then we found this one guy that had been hit by a car and was dying. I took him in and decided I would help find him a good home, and he has a great home.
Yeah.
He gets along great with the other 2, but we did end up having to, unfortunately, amputate his back leg because there was an exposed fracture. He had been hit by a car, and it wasn't healing. But wherever I go, that's one of the things that I have a hard time with, because I've gone a lot to like Asia, Europe, and countries that are less developed. And one of the things that's the hardest for me, and that was the hardest for me growing up in Puerto Rico, was the strays. Because I want to save every single one. How do you feel with that? How is that in Madrid?
It's hard. Where we are right now, there's not like a ton in our immediate neighborhood, but in the apartment that we were in before, there were a ton because people would feed them, so they stayed there. And they had babies and everything there. But yeah, it was really hard. Our first one was a street cat from the village that Angel's from. He followed his best friend home one day, and his friend didn't want to keep it, and came up to us at the festival a couple years ago and said, "Do you guys want a cat?" And we had just been talking about it, so we took him home that night.
Oh, sounds like serendipity.
It was even, we specifically said we wanted a Siamese, and that's what he was. So it was no questions asked. It was done.
Amazing. True love.
Yes.
I was getting a little distracted earlier because my husband was supposed to have left, but he got stuck here, and a neighbor started talking to him right outside our window, and it was really driving me crazy. I was kind of like, get out of here.
No worries. I sent mine out to the grocery store because I knew his phone would ring with someone else in the family.
My husband's really close to his family. And actually, I heard you mention when you were talking to Natalie and Alyssa that your favorite place to visit is Argentina. And my husband's from Buenos Aires.
Oh, nice. What part?
He's from the capital. He's what they call a porteño.
Okay. I'm actually where I'm sitting right now looking at a map of Argentina on the wall.
Oh, amazing. What we want to do is buy a boat to live aboard and sail it to Punta del Este in Uruguay, kind of take it from there. So I'd love to eventually live close to a seaplane base and bring over an N number plane, and,
That's awesome. Do you like to read?
I do.
Okay, if you haven't already, you have to read the book Spark Your Dream, but the original is in Spanish. I read it in English first. I'm going to read it next in Spanish. That's Atrapa tu Sueño. And it's about a couple that leaves Buenos Aires for Alaska in a 1926 Ford. And this was, I think they started in the 90s, I believe. The husband and wife wrote it together. I'm looking it up.
Oh, cool.
It is Herman Zapp, Z-A-P-P.
Okay. I'm totally going to look it up. I want to ask you if you have any advice for aspiring student pilots or people who are just interested in aviation.
Do it. Absolutely do it. Because no matter how far you go with it, it's something that you just enjoy the journey, and you'll make friends that'll last a lifetime. But I would say also have a few mentors at different stages of their careers. So maybe one that's just a little bit ahead of you, and then someone that's ultimately where you want to end up, or where you think you want to end up long term, and pick their brains, because there's not one clear path in aviation. It's not like, you go to med school or law school to become a doctor or a lawyer and it's written out for you. There's so many ways to go about this learning adventure, whether it's for fun or for a career. So just meet more people and learn about their experiences, because there's probably a known unknown out there that may be just right for you to get you somewhere that you didn't even know you wanted to be.
Excellent. Very good advice. And I hadn't heard that one before, but I find that super valuable. Is there something that's at the top of your aviation bucket list? Do you have one?
Well, I think, we debated this for a long time on this last trip to the States. Ultimately, with the current situation, ended up leaving the States sooner rather than later. But we were looking at going up to Alaska. I think flying up there would be absolutely incredible. One of our One Plane Jane ambassadors, Nicole, is up there now flying. And she said, come on up and visit. And gosh, that was really tempting to go up there and spend some time in Alaska in an airplane at best.
Yeah, I want to do that. But in the summer, of course. I mean,
yes.
I think that goes without saying for most people, but me particularly, being a Caribbean girl,
Oh, yeah, I'm cold when I go back to the States now. Spain changed me, and I was a northern girl in the States.
Yeah, Columbus, Ohio. I mean, that's pretty freaking cold.
Oh, it was. My car wouldn't start one morning. It was so cold.
Yeah, I tried to live in New York for a little bit. It was a bad idea. Once September hits, I can't take it. Plus, my birthday's 9/11, so that just doesn't work.
That's hard, yeah.
Everybody's very depressed on my birthday. The rest of the country seems to have forgotten, but New Yorkers are still very present to that because they lived it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's see. Do you have any interest in getting a seaplane rating or tail wheel or like any kind of specific rating or endorsement?
Yeah, I think both would be fun, actually. I'd have to flip a coin on which to do first. But yeah, I think both would be amazing, the seaplane and the tail wheel. And aerobatics too.
Ooh.
Would be great.
Yeah.
Just do even an intro course to aerobatics.
And I think it makes you a better pilot. I've been listening, yesterday alone I listened to 3 episodes of AOPA Air Safety Institute's There I Was, which is a podcast where they talk to pilots who've been in emergencies and they talk about how they've flown out of them. And it just seems that if you have experience in unusual attitudes, it is so valuable for when you find yourself in a real life, unexpected, unusual attitude.
Absolutely. I agree.
I think anything that makes you a safer pilot. That's why I want to also get my instrument rating as early as possible in my training.
Yeah, highly recommend it. I think it's hard to do early because you're drinking from the fire hose of information, but for me, I almost didn't have an option because flying in Ohio, I mean, you're going to be grounded if you don't have an instrument rating once you get your pilot. But it was extremely valuable. And even if you don't use it in instrument conditions, it makes you a safer pilot.
I've heard that, and I want that. And most of the super preventable accidents that I do hear about are people who, if they had had better instrument training or more instrument training, would not have had the problem. And a lot of times fatalities can be avoided just by knowing what you're doing with instruments.
Absolutely.
I feel super unfocused today. Over here, there's still so many closures. Nothing is back to normal, so it's just kind of hard to get your bearings.
I know, I can completely relate, and from when we went through here, and the month of July kind of just flew by for me. But really, I mean, until I sit down at dinner at night and have like a briefing on what's going on the next day, it's really just day by day right now for us.
Yeah, well, thank goodness you guys are further along already.
Yeah, well, we're just hoping it stays that way. But if there's one case in a town or city, it makes the news right now. So like an outbreak right now is considered like 10 people, and they're shutting down towns if they get even to 1,000 or less. They're regressing in the phases just to secure it immediately.
Well, the country such a bad time that of course they're going to want to, they respect it and they take it a lot more seriously than we are over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people are going along with it. I mean, it's a trade-off between, you question, do you just comply with things, or when do you ask questions about, well, why is this going on and does this make sense? But I mean, really nobody wants to spend another couple months in their homes, especially not in the middle of summer. So people are pretty compliant.
I'm happy that New Mexico, they're going to require us to wear masks when we're doing flight lessons and all that kind of stuff. I'm just happy that I'm going to get the opportunity to have something that's really going to take up my attention and that it's something that I'm passionate about. Yeah,
I mean, it's a bit of a blessing when you're able to just devote yourself to that, because I don't know if I slept less in college when I was writing my thesis or when I was commuting between cities and studying for my instrument exams.
Yeah, that's a tough call.
Yeah.
Do you get to, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, do you get to travel to other parts of Spain and Europe?
Yeah, we love to travel. We just got back yesterday from Malaga, and we're going back down again tomorrow. So it's down to the south of Spain. His parents spend the summers down there, so we usually go down and visit as frequently as we can. And it's a small station here, so he's the most junior and has last pick on vacations. And normally we take a week in the summer to visit my family, but this year we get to do it all.
Yeah. Do you get to go to Barcelona? Have you been?
I haven't been, actually. I've been to the south of Spain extensively, and then all around the center, like every day trip imaginable from Madrid. But I haven't done the East Coast nor the North Coast. As far north as I went was Pamplona for their festival my first summer here. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Anything else that you're looking forward to? Do you still want to work in aviation once you get your commercial? Do you still see yourself doing it as a career?
If the right position presented itself, I would definitely strongly consider it. But otherwise, I'd really like to use the knowledge to give back to others in an educational setting. It's the more realistic and enjoyable as well option for me, at least in the short term.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to contribute and to just be open to the possibilities. How does it get better than that?
Yeah, you really just never know what's going to present itself.
Yeah, I don't know. If you're anything like me, you like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting.
Awesome. And by the way, I love the face masks that you have on your website, right? Yeah.
Thank you. They take a little while, but it's known up front. But with some patients, we've been wearing them a lot. You can actually put a filter in it. So when we're in an airport, or if we have to go to a hospital for a test or anything like that, we know that we're pretty secure. But I actually, until those were available, I learned to sew as well and did some here.
Oh man, I can't sew.
Sewing in a straight line is much harder than one thinks. But I finally figured it out.
The only thing that I know how to sew back from when I used to be a professional dancer is how to sew the ribbon onto the point shoes.
That's how I learned to sew when I was like 12, I think. This was my first time with a machine.
I'm scared of those. I always think I'm going to like sew through my fingers. It's terrifying.
The fingers don't bother me. I think Ansa gave me safety glasses after I broke 2 needles. I ended up breaking probably about 5 more of them.
Is it harder to sew, fly a plane, or run a business?
Run a business.
Yeah, I feel you.
I think so.
Cool. And you're doing a first scholarship now, right, with One Plain Jane?
Yes, we are. So we'll have at least one $2,500 scholarship, which we're actually over that amount. And then the next threshold is $5,000. They would get split into 2 scholarships. But if we end up with less than that by the end of the summer, then it'll just be one larger scholarship for whatever amount between the $2,500 and $5,000. So we're going to wrap that up this summer and then open applications at the end of the summer.
That's amazing. Good luck with all of that. Of course.
Yeah, it's been a team effort with everyone. You can't do any of this stuff alone, so it's been good.
That's my downfall. I try to do everything myself.
That's how I was, and I think Spain actually taught me that doesn't work very well because I saw the community aspect here and actually how functional it is. So, I mean, I'm still stubbornly independent at times, but I've learned to trust others, at least with a lot of decisions, more decisions than you think can be delegated.
I'm working on it.
I'm still working on it. It's a process.
Okay, good. Then I don't feel so bad.
Not at all.
Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with before we say goodbye?
I think just believe that you can do it and ask questions, make friends, enjoy the journey. And I mean, anyone's welcome to reach out to me. And if I don't have an answer, I'll try to find someone that does to help you out along the way. Solid
advice and generous offer. I will definitely put all your links and your information in the show notes and in the intro so that people can get a hold of you and also check out your super cool products.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that concludes the conversation that I got to have with Christine Hannon of One Plain Jane. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here at Chicks Who Fly. We really enjoy doing this podcast for you. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube, as well as sharing with all your friends who might enjoy this podcast as well. Also, if you would like to be more intimately involved with the creation of this podcast, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon at Chicks Who Fly. You can reach us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com and on our website, chickswhofly.com. Thank you so much once again, and we look forward to spending some more time with you on the next episode of Chicks Who Fly.